Elara's bare feet hammered the forest floor, roots clawing at her ankles with every stride. The ceremonial gown tangled around her knees, white silk already torn and muddy. She hitched it higher and ran. Behind her, a roar split the night. The sound wasn't human. It rattled through her ribs and shook leaves from the branches overhead. Every wolf in the territory would have heard it. Every wolf would know their alpha was furious. She'd made it 3 steps off the dais before the elders started shouting. Another 5 before she hit the tree line. No one had chased her. No one except him. Her lungs burned. The bond mark on her wrist throbbed where the ceremonial blade had cut, half finished, still bleeding. She pressed her palm over it and kept moving. The forest blurred around her. Moonlight barely reached the ground here. She'd grown up in these woods, knew every game trail and creek bed, but panic stripped all of it away. She only knew forward. Away. Another roar, closer this time. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. She veered left, toward the ravine. Stupid. Dangerous. But maybe he wouldn't follow her down. The ground dropped away without warning. She hit the slope hard, sliding on her hip, grabbing at saplings that snapped in her hands. Rocks bit into her palms. The world spun. Dirt and sky trading places. And then she crashed into the bottom in a heap of torn silk and bruised limbs. For a moment she just lay there, gasping. The forest above had gone silent. She pushed herself up on shaking arms. The ravine was narrow, steep-sided, choked with underbrush. A trickle of water ran somewhere to her left. She could follow it downstream, find the old logging road, disappear before dawn. She could run. A low growl froze her in place. Elara lifted her head slowly. 2 eyes glowed gold in the darkness, 10 feet up the slope. Not reflecting the moon. Glowing. The kind of light that came from within. From the wolf pressing just beneath the skin. Alpha Kael stood at the edge of the ravine, perfectly still. Even in the dark she could see the shape of him. Tall, broad-shouldered, every line of him coiled tight. His shirt was half unbuttoned, the ceremonial sash torn away. His jaw was set, canines just visible when he breathed. He didn't speak. Elara's pulse hammered in her throat. She'd never seen him like this. During the 3 weeks of preparation, he'd been distant, formal. He'd met her twice, shaken her hand once, let the elders do the talking, while he watched her with those unreadable dark eyes. She hadn't expected the wolf. "Don't." Her voice came out raw. "Don't come down here." He took a step forward. Stones skittered down the slope under his boot. "I said, don't." "You ran." His voice was rough, halfway to a snarl. In front of the entire pack. In the middle of the ceremony. "I know." "You humiliated me." She flinched. That wasn't why she'd done it. But she couldn't argue. Kael started down the slope. Not sliding, not scrambling. Moving with the unnatural balance of a predator who knew exactly how strong he was. He reached the bottom in 3 long strides and stopped an arm's length away. Elara made herself stay still. Running again would only trigger the chase. He stared at her. The glow in his eyes hadn't faded. His chest rose and fell too fast, his control hanging by a thread. Why? The word was almost lost in the growl behind it. Elara swallowed. Her wrist still throbbed, the half-bond burning under her skin. She could feel him now, just barely. A pull like a fishhook lodged somewhere near her heart. She hated it. "I heard the elders talking," she said quietly. "Before the ceremony." His jaw tightened. "What did they say?" "That the bond was political. That your pack needs an alliance with mine. And this was the cleanest way to get it. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing. That you didn't care who I was as long as I had the right bloodline. Kael went very still. The growl died. The forest filled with the sound of water trickling over stone in her own uneven breathing. So you ran, he said. So I ran, he exhaled, slow and controlled, and the glow in his eyes dimmed just slightly. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, colder. You're bleeding. Elara glanced down. Her palms were scraped raw, her knees bruised through the torn gown. The bond mark on her wrist had opened wider in the fall, blood trailing down to her elbow. I'm fine. You're not. He moved before she could step back, catching her wrist in one hand. His grip was careful, warm. This needs to be wrapped, or it'll scar wrong. She tried to pull away. I don't care. I do. The words came out hard. Final. He held her gaze, and for a moment she saw something flicker behind the anger, something that looked almost like hurt. Then he let go. You'll come back to the pack house, he said. Now. It wasn't a request. Elara's throat tightened. And if I don't? Then I'll carry you. He said it, without heat, just fact. The kind of thing an alpha did when his authority had already been questioned once tonight, and he couldn't afford to let it happen twice. She looked up at the steep ravine walls, at the dark forest beyond, at the man standing between her and any chance of escape. She thought about the elders, voices, political, convenient, necessary. She thought about the way he'd roared when she ran. Fine, she whispered. Kael's expression didn't change. He turned and started back up the slope, not waiting to see if she'd follow. Elara stood there a moment longer, her wrist burning, her heart still racing. Then she climbed after him into the dark. The climb back up was harder than the fall. Elara's legs shook with every step, her torn gown catching on roots and stones. Kael moved ahead of her without looking back, his shoulders rigid, his silence louder than any command. She kept her eyes on his boots. Tried not to think about the bond mark still burning on her wrist. By the time they reached level ground, her lungs were screaming. She bent forward, hands on her knees, gasping. Kael stopped, waited. She straightened slowly, met his eyes. Why? He said. The question hung in the air between them. Elara's throat closed. I already told you. No. He stepped closer. You told me what you heard. I'm asking why you believed it. She stared at him. Because it's true. Is it? His voice had gone quieter, dangerous in a different way now. She wrapped her arms around herself. The elders don't lie about politics. They don't lie, Kael said slowly, but they don't tell the whole truth either. Something flickered in his expression. Gone before she could name it. Then tell me, she said. Tell me the whole truth. He looked at her for a long moment. The forest around them had gone still, as if the trees themselves were listening. The alliance is real, he said finally. Your father and mine discussed it before he died, before either of us knew what a mate bond felt like. He paused, but the bond itself was convenient. Elara finished. Was fate. The word hit her like a blow. She shook her head. You don't believe in fate? I didn't. His jaw worked. Not until I scented you at the border 3 months ago. Elara's breath caught. She remembered that day, her father's delegation arriving for the first treaty talks. She'd stayed in the carriage, too nervous to meet the infamous Alpha, who'd taken his father's place at 23 and held it through 2 challenges. She hadn't seen him, but she'd felt something, a pull she couldn't name. You were there, she whispered, I was there. Kael's voice had gone rough. And I knew. She wanted to believe him. The bond mark on her wrist pulsed with heat, as if it recognized his words. But the elders' voices were still in her head. Political, necessary, convenient. Then why didn't you tell me? She asked. Why let them talk about bloodlines and alliances like I was just? Because they're right. The words cut clean through. Elara flinched. Kael closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were gold bright in the dark. The alliance matters. Your bloodline matters. If I'd bonded with anyone else, your father would have withdrawn his support, and we'd be facing war by spring. He took a breath. So yes, it's political, she'd known. But hearing him say, it still felt like falling. But it's also true that I would have chosen you anyway, he said quietly. Alliance or not, war or not, I would have crossed every border and broken every treaty to bring you here. Elara's heart slammed against her ribs. You don't know me, she whispered. I know you ran the minute you thought you didn't have a choice. His mouth curved, bitter. I know you'd rather bleed in a ravine than be someone's political pawn. I know you're brave enough to face down an alpha in the dark when any sane wolf would have submitted the second I gave the command. She swallowed hard. And I know, he continued softer now, that I've wanted you since the moment I caught your scent, and I didn't have the words to tell you before the ceremony because I'm better at giving orders than explaining what I feel. The bond mark flared. Elara pressed her hand over it, trying to calm the heat. That's not enough, she said. Kael went still. What? Wanting me. Feeling the bond. That's not. She struggled for the words. I need to know you'd choose me, even if it cost you something. His expression shifted. Something dark moved behind his eyes. Elara, because right now it costs you nothing, she said. You get the mate and the alliance, and your pack's future, all tied up in one convenient package. So how do I know? You think this costs me nothing? His voice cracked like a whip. She froze. Kael took a step forward. Then another. Close enough now that she could feel the heat rolling off him, see the gold bleeding through his irises. You think it costs me nothing to stand in front of my entire pack and watch you run? His words came low and harsh. To hear them whisper that I couldn't even keep my own mate through a 10-minute ceremony? To know that every wolf in 3 territories will hear about this by morning? Elara's breath hitched. You've already cost me, he said quietly. The only question now is whether you're worth it. The words should have hurt, should have felt like an insult. Instead, they felt like the first honest thing he'd said all night. She met his eyes, held them. Am I? She whispered. Kael's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and touched the bond mark on her wrist. His thumb traced the half-formed pattern. Gentle. Reverent. Yes, he said. The bond flared between them. Not complete, not whole, but alive. Elara shivered. Kael's hand dropped. He stepped back, breaking the contact. You'll come back to the pack house, he said again. This time it wasn't quite a command. I'll have Mir bring you clean clothes and tend your injuries. You'll stay in the guest wing until... He stopped. Until what? Elara asked. His expression shuddered. Until you decide whether I'm worth it too. He turned and walked into the trees without waiting for an answer. Elara stood alone at the ravine's edge, her wrist still burning, her heart a tangled mess of anger and longing, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Then she followed him home. The guest room was smaller than Elara expected. Clean walls, a single window overlooking the eastern training grounds, a bed that smelled of fresh linen and nothing else. No scent of him. She told herself that was a relief. Kael had walked her through the pack house in silence, every wolf they passed stopping to stare, some with curiosity, others with barely concealed contempt. One older female had actually bared her teeth until Kael's low growl sent her scurrying. He'd left Elara at the door with instructions to rest and a promise that his sister would come soon. That had been 2 hours ago. Elara paced the narrow space between bed and window, her wrist still burning where he'd touched the bond mark. The pattern had stopped spreading, but it hadn't faded either. Half complete. Suspended. A constant reminder of what she'd broken. She pressed her palm against the glass and watched the wolves below running drills. Sharp formations. Perfect synchronization. The kind of discipline that came from trusting your alpha. Trust she'd just shattered in front of all of them. The door opened without a knock. Elara spun. The woman who entered was tall and lean, with Kael's same dark hair and sharp cheekbones. But where his eyes were storm gray, hers were amber, bright and assessing. "You must be the runaway bride," she said, not a question. Elara lifted her chin. "And you must be the sister who didn't bother knocking." The woman's mouth quirked. "Mira." She kicked the door shut behind her and tossed a bundle of clothes onto the bed. "Clean things. They'll fit well enough." "Thank you." Mira crossed to the window and looked out at the training grounds. Her shoulders were tense beneath her jacket. Elara waited. "My brother's an idiot," Mira said finally. "I'm starting to agree with you. He should have told you the truth from the beginning. Should have explained why the elders wanted the bond and what it meant for the pack." Mira turned. Her amber eyes were hard. "But he didn't, so now we're all paying for it." The words landed like a punch. "What do you mean?" Elara asked quietly. Mira studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed and pulled a chair out from the small desk in the corner. Sat. "There's another alpha," she said. "Varen. He rules the Northern Territory. He and Kael have been, let's call it unfriendly, for years." Elara's stomach tightened. "Varen wanted an alliance with our pack. Offered his sister as a mate bond to Kael 2 years ago." Mira's voice was flat. Kael refused. Said he wouldn't bond for politics. That when he found his true mate, he'd know. The room felt suddenly smaller. "Then you showed up at the border 3 weeks ago," Mira continued. "Half-starved and running from whatever hell you came from. Kael scented you, and the bond snapped into place so fast, it knocked him on his ass." Despite everything, Elara felt a flicker of satisfaction at that image. "The elders saw an opportunity," Mira said. "Kael gets his true mate, the pack gets a Luna, and Varen gets a very clear message that we don't need his alliance or his sister." "So they pushed for the ceremony," Elara said slowly. "They pushed. Kael agreed because he wanted you anyway and figured why wait?" Mira's expression hardened. "But Varen isn't the type to take rejection well, and now that the ceremony failed, he'll see it as weakness." Elara's voice came out barely above a whisper. Mira nodded. The training ground below suddenly made more sense. The extra patrols. The tension humming through the pack house. They were preparing for something. "When?" Elara asked. "Dawn, maybe sooner." Mira stood. "Varen sent word an hour ago. He's coming to observe the situation. That's the polite term for what he's actually planning." Elara's hands curled into fists. "And if Kael can't prove the bond is solid, then Varen will challenge his authority. Say Kael can't even keep his own mate. How can he be trusted to lead a pack?" Mira's jaw tightened. "And he won't be wrong." The words hung in the air between them. Elara turned back to the window. Watched Kael emerge from the pack house below, his posture rigid as he spoke to a group of wolves near the training circle. Even from this distance she could see the tension in his shoulders, the cost she'd already made him pay. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I believe you." Mira moved toward the door. "But that won't matter to Varen, or to half the pack who think you're just a coward who got cold feet." Elara flinched. Mira paused with her hand on the doorknob. "For what it's worth, I think you were smart to run when you heard what the elders said. Politics and prophecy make terrible foundations for a bond." She pulled the door open. "But if you're still here come morning," Mira added, "Varen's going to assume you're weak, and he's going to push until something breaks." The door clicked shut. Elara stood alone in the small room, her reflection ghostly in the darkening window. Below, Kael had shifted his attention upward. Their eyes met across the distance. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just held her gaze for 3 long heartbeats before turning back to his wolves. The bond mark pulsed against her skin. Elara pressed her palm over it and tried to ignore the sick feeling spreading through her chest. She'd run to save herself from being a political pawn. Instead, she'd made Kael into one, and tomorrow a rival alpha would come to collect. Dawn broke cold and gray over the valley. Elara hadn't slept. She'd spent the night pacing the small room, replaying every choice that had led her here. Every step that had seemed so clear in the moment and so reckless now. The bond mark under her collarbone hadn't stopped burning. She pressed her forehead against the window glass and watched the horizon lighten, watched wolves gather in loose clusters across the grounds below. Their movements were careful, controlled, afraid. The realization settled in her stomach like stone. A howl split the morning quiet. It came from the eastern ridge. Long and mocking, carrying a challenge that made every wolf below freeze mid-step. Ilara's breath fogged the glass. Another howl answered. Then another. A chorus of voices that didn't belong to Kael's pack. The door behind her unlocked. She spun. Mira stood in the doorway, fully dressed in dark leather, a silver blade strapped to her thigh. "Stay away from the window," Mira said quietly, "and don't go downstairs." "I need to. You need to stay out of sight until Kael says otherwise." Mira's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Varen's wolves are already at the boundary. He's coming in with a full escort." Elara's hands curled at her sides. "How many?" 12. "Maybe more. That's not an observation party." "No." Mira's jaw tightened. "It's not." She pulled the door shut before Elara could ask anything else. The lock clicked back into place. Elara turned to the window despite the warning. Pressed close enough to see but not be silhouetted against the light. Movement at the tree line. A group of wolves emerged from the forest in human form, their strides confident and deliberate. They wore dark, traveling leathers marked with silver clasps. Warriors, all of them, hard faces and harder eyes. At the center of the group walked a man who could only be Varen. He was tall, broad-shouldered. His hair was black as pitch and pulled back from a face that was handsome in the way a blade was handsome, sharp and unforgiving. His eyes swept the grounds with the ease of someone who'd already decided he owned everything he saw. Kael stepped out to meet him. The space between them crackled with tension even from this distance. Elara's pulse hammered against her ribs. Varen stopped 10 paces from Kael, close enough to speak, far enough to make it clear he didn't consider Kael a threat. His voice carried on the morning air. "I heard you lost something, brother." The word brother was delivered like an insult. Kael didn't react. His posture was stone. "You heard wrong." "Did I?" Varen tilted his head. "Because the way I understand it, your pretty little bride ran from the ceremony before the bond could seal. In front of the whole pack." He glanced around at the gathered wolves. "That's not losing? That's just embarrassing. A ripple of unease moved through Kael's wolves. Elara's nails bit into her palms. "The bond stands," Kael said evenly. "She's here. The ceremony will be completed." Varen laughed. It was a cold sound, sharp enough to cut. "She's locked in a guest room like a prisoner," Varen said. "That's not a mate. That's a liability you're too proud to admit you can't handle." Kael's hands flexed at his sides, the only sign of strain. "If you came here to talk," Kael said quietly, "talk. If you came to waste my time, you can leave the way you arrived." Varen's smile widened. "I came to offer a solution." He stepped forward. One deliberate pace. "You're struggling, Kael. Everyone can see it. The alliance your father built is fracturing because you can't even keep your own house in order." Another step. "So here's what I propose." He gestured lazily toward the pack house, toward the window where Elara stood hidden in shadow. "Give her to me," Varen said. "Let me finish what you started. I'll take her as my mate, seal the bond properly, and the alliance stays intact. You save face. The pack gets stability. Everyone wins." Elara's breath stopped. Kael didn't move, didn't speak. The silence stretched long enough that Elara felt her heart crack open in her chest. Then Kael's voice cut through, the quiet like a blade. "No. One word. Flat and absolute." Varen's smile faltered. "You'd rather watch everything fall apart than admit you failed?" "I didn't fail." Kael's eyes glowed faintly in the gray light, gold bleeding into the edges. "And she's not a bargaining chip?" "Then prove it." Varen spread his hands. "Prove the bond is real. Prove she chose you and not just the ceremony. Prove you're not just clinging to pride while your pack suffers." Kael's jaw tightened. 3 days, Varen continued. His voice dropped into something softer, more dangerous. "That's all I'm asking. 3 days to show me, show everyone, that this bond is worth protecting. If you can't," he shrugged, "then step aside and let someone else carry the weight." Elara pressed closer to the glass. Kael's wolves were watching him, waiting. She could see the calculation in his eyes. The cost of refusing. The cost of agreeing. "And if I prove it?" Kael asked. "Then I leave. No challenge. No interference." Varen's smile returned. "But if you can't, you forfeit your claim. To her, to the alliance, to everything your father built." The air between them hummed with unseen pressure. Kael held Varen's gaze for 3 long heartbeats. Then he nodded once. 3 days, Kael said. Varen's grin sharpened into something triumphant. 3 days, he echoed. He turned on his heel and gestured to his wolves. "We'll camp at the ridge. I'm sure you'll make us comfortable." He didn't wait for an answer, just walked back toward the tree line with his pack trailing behind him like shadows. Elara sagged against the window frame. Below, Kael stood alone in the center of the grounds. His shoulders were rigid, his hands still clenched at his sides. Then his head tilted upward. His eyes found her window. Even through the glass and distance, the weight of his gaze pinned her in place. He held it for 1 breath, 2. Then he turned and walked back into the pack house. Elara's legs gave out. She slid down the wall and pressed both palms against the bond mark. 3 days. 3 days to prove something she wasn't even sure existed. The door opened without a knock. Elara jerked upright from where she'd been sitting against the wall, heart hammering. Kael stood in the doorway, backlit by the dim hallway sconces. His eyes caught the light and threw it back in faint gold. He stepped inside, closed the door behind him with a quiet click. She pressed her spine harder against the wall. "You can't just—" "I can." His voice was low, steady. "It's my house. I didn't agree to be locked in here. You didn't agree to run either." He crossed the room in 3 strides and stopped 2 feet away, close enough that she could smell pine and cold air clinging to his clothes. "But you did it anyway." Elara's fingers curled against the floorboards. "So did you. You agreed to his trial. Because you left me no choice." The words hit like a slap. She flinched before she could stop herself. Kael's jaw worked. He looked away, then back. "That's not?" He exhaled hard through his nose. "I didn't come here to fight." "Then why did you come?" He crouched down in front of her. Slow, deliberate. His knees hit the floor, and suddenly they were eye level. She could see the faint shadows under his eyes, the tension carved into the space between his brows. "I came to ask you something," he said. Her pulse kicked against her ribs. "What?" "Will you give me 3 days?" She blinked. "You already agreed to the trial. I don't get a vote." "You do." His gaze didn't waver. "Varin wants proof the bond is real. I can't give him that unless you're willing to try." "Try what?" "This." He gestured between them. The air felt heavier where his hand moved. "Us. The bond. Whatever this is supposed to be." Elara's throat tightened. "The elders said it was political." "It was." He didn't flinch from the truth. "They approached me 6 months ago. Said your pack needed protection and mine needed an alliance. They picked you because your bloodline was clean and your wolf was strong." His voice dropped. "They told me it was duty, strategy, the smart choice." She waited. Her chest ached. "They were right," Kael continued. "It was smart. It made sense on paper. But then I met you." Her breath caught. "The night before the ceremony," he said quietly. "You were in the garden, barefoot in the grass, talking to Mira about whether the stars had names." His mouth curved faintly. Not quite a smile. "You laughed, and I felt it in my chest, like something waking up." Elara stared at him. She remembered that night. Remembered Mira teasing her about being nervous. Remembered the cool grass under her feet and the sky so wide it made her dizzy. She hadn't known he was watching. "I went to the elders the next morning," Kael said. "Told them I wanted the bond, not because it was smart, because I wanted you." His eyes burned into hers. "They told me to keep it to myself. Said if you knew it started as arrangement, you'd run." Her heart twisted. "They were right." "I know." He leaned forward slightly, close enough that she could see the gold bleeding through his irises. "But they were also wrong, because it didn't start as arrangement. Not for me. Not after I saw you." She wanted to believe him. Wanted it so badly her hands shook. "You scented me," he said, voice rough now. "The moment you walked into the hall. I saw it in your face, the way your wolf recognized mine." "That's just biology," she whispered. "Maybe," he tilted his head, "or maybe it's the only honest thing either of us had that night." She pressed her palms flat against the floor to stop the trembling. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I'm an idiot." His mouth twisted. "Because I thought if I just went through with the ceremony you'd feel it too. That the bond would do the work for me." He exhaled. "I was wrong." The bond mark on her wrist pulsed faintly. She glanced down at it. The ink-dark lines hadn't faded, hadn't spread either. Frozen halfway. Kael's corsail's gaze followed hers. "It's stuck," he said quietly. "I know. It'll stay that way unless we finish it. Or break it." Her chest tightened. "Which do you want?" He leaned closer. close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating off him. His wolf rising just under his skin. "I want you to choose," he said. "Not because the elders say so, not because Varen's watching, not because the pack needs it." His voice dropped to something rawer. "I want you to choose me because you want to." Elara's pulse roared in her ears. "And if I don't? Then I'll break the bond myself." He said it like a vow. "I'll tell Varen the truth. That I tried to trap you into something you didn't want. I'll take the loss, the shame. All of it." His eyes didn't leave hers. "But I won't force you to stay." She searched his face for a lie, for manipulation or desperation, or anything that looked like the cold political calculation she'd overheard in the hall. All she saw was him. Tired. Honest. Waiting. 3 days, she said slowly. His shoulders stiffened. "Yeah. What happens in 3 days? I prove to you that I choose you. Every day. Every moment. No arrangement. No strategy." He held her gaze. "Just me. Choosing you." The air between them felt electric. Dangerous. "And if I still don't believe you?" Kael's jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "Then I let you go." Elara's hands curled into fists. She thought about the garden. The stars. The way her wolf had surged forward the moment she'd seen him in the hall. She thought about running. About the fear that no one would ever choose her first. "Okay?" she whispered. His eyes flared. "Okay?" 3 days. She lifted her chin. "Prove it." Kael's mouth curved into something that looked almost like hope. He stood slowly and offered her his hand. She looked at it, palm up. Steady. Then she reached out and let him pull her to her feet. The bond mark flared warm against her wrist the moment their skin touched. Kael didn't let go of her hand. He led her down the hall, through the silent corridors of the pack house, and out the side door where the morning light was just beginning to bleed through the trees. Elara's pulse hadn't steadied since she'd said yes. 3 days. She'd agreed to 3 days. Her wolf stirred beneath her ribs, restless and curious and far too eager. Kael's grip was firm, but not tight, like he was afraid she'd bolt again if he pressed too hard. Maybe she would. They crossed the training yard in silence. A few early risers paused to watch them pass, but Kael didn't acknowledge any of them. His focus stayed locked ahead, his jaw set in that grim line she was starting to recognize. He was nervous. The thought settled something in her chest. An alpha shouldn't be nervous. Not about this. Not about her. But he was. They reached the edge of the forest, and Kael finally slowed. He glanced back at her, his eyes catching the dawn light in a way that made them almost gold. "It's not far," he said quietly. Elara nodded. She didn't trust her voice yet. He led her deeper into the trees, down a narrow path she hadn't noticed before. The air smelled like damp earth and pine, and something sweeter beneath it. Wildflowers, maybe. The bond mark on her wrist pulsed faintly with every step. She tried not to think about what that meant. After a few minutes, the trees opened into a small clearing. Elara stopped. It was beautiful. A ring of old oaks circled the space, their branches woven together overhead like a canopy. Sunlight filtered through in soft golden beams. At the center of the clearing, wildflowers grew in thick clusters, blue and white and pale violet, and at the heart of it all, 2 stones stood side by side. Each one was waist-high, smooth and dark, with names carved into the surface. Elara's breath caught. Kael's hand slipped free from hers. He walked forward slowly, his shoulders tight, and stopped in front of the stones. Elara followed. The names were simple. Clean lines carved deep. Ronan. Isla. Kael's parents. She didn't need him to say it. They bonded here, Kael said quietly. His voice was rough. My father brought her at dawn, the way his father had done, and his father before that. Elara's throat tightened. It's tradition, he continued. The alpha brings his mate here first, before the ceremony, before the pack. He reached out and brushed his fingers over his mother's name, to make a promise, just between them. The clearing felt sacred, untouched. Elara didn't move. They died when I was 16, Kael said. Rogue attack during a winter storm. They were trying to protect the eastern border. His jaw clenched. I wasn't there. Elara's chest ached. I was supposed to be with them, he said. But my father told me to stay back. Said I wasn't ready yet. He exhaled sharply. He was right. Kael? I became alpha 3 days later, he continued. The elders pushed it through fast. Said the pack needed stability. Needed someone strong. He finally looked at her. His eyes were raw. I've spent the last 8 years trying not to fail them. Elara's hands trembled. She didn't know what to say. What could she say to that? Kael turned back to the stones. When the elders told me about the bond, he said slowly, I thought it was another duty, another thing I had to do right. He paused. I thought if I just went through with it, if I followed the tradition, it would be enough. His voice dropped. But then, I scented you. Elara's breath hitched, and everything else stopped mattering. The bond mark flared warm against her wrist. Kael looked at her again, and this time his expression was softer, more open. I brought you here because I don't know how else to show you, he said. This is the only place I've ever felt like I could be honest, like I didn't have to be the alpha first. Elara's wolf surged forward, pressing against her ribs. She took a step closer, then another, until she was standing beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Thank you, she said quietly. Kael's brow furrowed. For what? For showing me. His throat worked. Elara reached out slowly, carefully, and let her hand rest over his. The bond mark flared hot the moment their skin touched. Not painful, just present, alive. Kael's fingers curled around hers, and she felt the tremor in them. I don't know if I can be what you need, she whispered. His grip tightened. You already are. She looked up at him, and the expression on his face made her chest ache. Not the cold alpha from the ceremony, not the furious wolf who'd chased her through the forest. Just him, honest, afraid, hoping. Elara's wolf hummed low and deep, and for the first time since she'd run, she didn't fight it. She let it rise, let it recognize him. And when Kael's eyes flared gold, she knew he felt it too. The pull, the bond reaching for itself. Not finished, not broken, just waiting. One day down, Kael said softly. Elara's mouth curved into the smallest smile. 2 to go. His thumb brushed over her knuckles, slow and deliberate, and the bond mark pulsed again. Warmer this time, stronger. She didn't pull away. Hash. Part 7. The morning of the second day started quiet. Too quiet. Elara stood near the edge of the clearing, where Kael had asked her to wait while he spoke with the scouts. The sun was just beginning to burn off the fog that clung to the pines, and her wolf paced restlessly beneath her skin. She'd woken with the bond mark warm against her wrist. Not burning, just aware of him. She'd felt the tug of it when he left her door before dawn, felt the thread of it stretch taut as he moved through the forest. It should have frightened her. It still did, a little. But after yesterday, after the grove in his hand in hers, it didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt like an anchor. Kael returned through the trees, his expression unreadable. 2 wolves flanked him, both young and wary. He said something low to them, and they dipped their heads before melting back into the shadows. "Everything all right?" Elara asked as he approached. Kael's jaw tightened. "Varen's wolves crossed into the northern border this morning." Her stomach dropped. "How many?" "3 that we know of." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the tension in his shoulders. They retreated when the scouts confronted them, but they left a message. "What kind of message?" His eyes flicked to hers. Gold edged the gray. "They said the hunt is open ground. Fair game." Elara's wolf snarled low. "He's trying to provoke you. He's trying to prove I can't protect you." Kael's voice was rough, controlled. "If I react, he'll say I'm unstable. If I don't, he'll say I'm weak." She stepped closer. "So what do we do?" Kael looked at her for a long moment. Then his mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "We hunt." Her brow furrowed. "You just said." "I said he wants me to react. I didn't say I was going to hide." His gaze held hers. "You wanted to see what the bond feels like when we're not pretending. This is it." Elara's pulse kicked up. "You're serious. Always." He tilted his head toward the trees. "Stay close. Trust your instincts. And if I tell you to run, you run." She opened her mouth to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. Not a command. A plea. "All right," she said quietly. Kael's eyes softened just a fraction. Then he turned and started into the forest. Elara followed. They moved through the trees in silence, Kael leading and Elara half a step behind. Her wolf was on high alert now, ears pricked and nose working. She could feel Kael's presence ahead of her like a low hum in her chest, steady and grounding. The bond mark pulsed in time with her heartbeat. She didn't know how long they'd been walking when Kael suddenly stopped. His head snapped to the left, and his whole body went rigid. Elara froze. "Kael?" His voice was barely a whisper. "They're here." The words had barely left his mouth when the first wolf burst from the underbrush. Gray and massive, teeth bared, moving too fast. Kael shifted before Elara could blink. His clothes tore away as his body reshaped itself, black fur rippling down his spine and claws tearing into the dirt. He met the gray wolf mid-leap, and the impact shook the ground. Elara stumbled back, her heart in her throat. 2 more wolves emerged from the trees. Her wolf screamed at her to shift, to fight, but her human side was still frozen, still trying to process the snarls and the blood and the way Kael's massive form was moving, faster than she'd ever seen, brutal and precise. One of the wolves turned toward her, yellow eyes, scarred muzzle. It lunged. Elara's instincts took over. She shifted mid-breath, her body folding and reshaping in a burst of heat and adrenaline. Her wolf hit the ground running, smaller than the attacker, but faster. She dodged left, felt claws rake across her shoulder, and twisted back to snap at its flank. The wolf yelped and spun, but she was already moving. Kael's roar split the air. She glanced back just in time to see him sink his teeth into the gray wolf's throat. The wolf went limp. Kael dropped it and turned, eyes blazing gold, searching for her. The scarred wolf lunged again. Kael was faster. He hit the wolf like a freight train, driving it into the dirt with enough force that Elara heard bone crack. The wolf didn't get up. The third one fled. Silence dropped over the clearing like a weight. Elara's wolf stood frozen, sides heaving, blood trickling down her shoulder. It wasn't deep. It didn't matter. Her whole body was shaking. Kael shifted back in a blur of motion, human again, naked and streaked with dirt and blood, eyes still glowing faintly as he crossed to her in 3 long strides. "Shift," he said, his voice hoarse. She did, and the moment she was human again, his hands were on her, turning her shoulder toward the light, his fingers gentle despite the fury still radiating off him in waves. "It's shallow," she managed. Her voice shook. Kael's jaw worked. "They targeted you. They targeted both of us." "No!" His eyes snapped to hers. "They came for you first." Elara's breath caught. Because he was right. The scarred wolf had ignored Kael entirely until she'd engaged. This wasn't just a challenge. It was a message. Kael exhaled hard and pulled her forward, wrapping both arms around her and pressing her face into his chest. His heart was hammering. His whole body was taut with barely leashed rage. "I'm okay," she whispered. "You're bleeding." "So are you." His grip tightened. "If I'd been slower." "You weren't." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. His eyes were still edged in gold. Still wild. "Kael, you weren't." He stared at her, something raw and unguarded flickering across his face. Then he kissed her. Hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. Elara's hands came up to his shoulders, her fingers digging into his skin as the bond mark flared hot between them. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and his breathing was ragged. "I'm choosing you," he said, rough and low. "Right now, in this moment, I'm choosing you." Elara's throat tightened. "I know," she whispered. And she believed him. The cave was cold, but Kael's body was a furnace against hers. Elara pressed closer, her fingers still tangled in his hair, the kiss leaving her breathless and raw. When they finally broke apart, his forehead stayed pressed to hers, and neither of them moved. "We need to get back," he said quietly. She nodded, but her hands didn't let go. Kael's thumb traced the line of her jaw, and his eyes, still faintly gold, searched hers. "Tomorrow is the last day." "I know." Varen will push harder. "I know." His mouth curved, just barely. "You're not afraid." "I am," she corrected, "but not of him." Kael's expression shifted. Something softer, something that made her chest ache. "What are you afraid of?" he asked. Elara swallowed. "That I'll mess this up, that I'll say the wrong thing in front of everyone and give him an opening." "You won't." "You don't know that." "I do." His hand slid to the back of her neck, gentle and grounding. "Because you're stronger than you think you are." Her breath hitched. "And because," he added, his voice dropping lower, "you're not doing this alone." Elara closed her eyes. The bond mark pulsed warm beneath her skin, steady and sure. "We should go," she whispered. This time he let her pull away. They shifted again for the run back. Kael stayed close, his shoulder brushing hers every few strides, his eyes scanning the trees. No one attacked, but Elara could feel the weight of eyes on them anyway. Watching, waiting. By the time they reached the pack house, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust. Mira was waiting on the front steps, arms crossed, her mouth pressed into a tight line. "You're late," she said flatly. Kael shifted back and reached for the clothes someone had left folded on the porch rail. "We ran into trouble," Mira's eyes flicked to Elara, who was pulling on a loose shirt, and then to the shallow cut still visible on her shoulder. Her expression darkened. Varen's wolves? 3 of them, Kael said. They're dealt with. Dealt with. Mira repeated. She looked at Elara again. Are you hurt? I'm fine. Mira didn't look convinced, but she nodded. Good. Because tomorrow's going to be worse. Kael's jaw tightened. I know. Do you? Mira stepped closer, lowering her voice. Because Varen's been talking all day, spreading doubt. Saying the bond isn't real. Saying you're desperate, and she's using you for protection. Elara's stomach dropped. Kael's eyes flashed gold. Let 'em talk. They're listening, Kael, Mira said quietly. Some of them are starting to wonder. Silence fell between them, sharp and heavy. Elara's hands curled into fists. She could feel the weight of it pressing down on her chest. The scrutiny, the judgment, the impossible standard she was supposed to meet. She'd spent her whole life being overlooked, dismissed, told she wasn't enough, and now she was supposed to stand in front of an entire pack and prove that she was worthy of their alpha. I'll handle it, Kael said, his voice low and firm. Mira looked at him for a long moment. Then she sighed. You'd better. She turned and walked back inside, leaving them alone on the porch. Kael exhaled hard and ran a hand through his hair. She's right. I know. He looked at her, and the frustration in his eyes shifted into something gentler. You don't have to prove anything to them. Yes, I do, Elara said quietly. That's the whole point of the trial. The trial's about proving the bond is real, not about proving you're good enough. She met his gaze. Isn't that the same thing? Kael stepped closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. No, he said firmly. It's not. Elara's throat tightened. You are enough, he said, his voice rough and steady. Just as you are. And tomorrow, I'm going to make sure everyone knows it. Her eyes burned. She blinked hard, willing the tears back. Okay, she whispered. Kael's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead, slow and deliberate. Get some rest, he said quietly. Tomorrow's going to be long. Elara didn't sleep. She lay in the narrow bed in the guest room, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. Tomorrow, she would stand in front of the pack, in front of Varen, in front of everyone who doubted her. And she would have to prove that the bond was real, that she chose Kael, that he chose her. Her hand drifted to the bond mark on her chest, fingers tracing the faint raised lines beneath her shirt. It was warm, steady, real. She closed her eyes and focused on the feeling, the pull, the certainty, the quiet hum of connection that thrummed beneath her skin. It wasn't just instinct. It wasn't just fate. It was choice, hers, and his. And tomorrow, she was going to say it out loud. When dawn broke, the pack had already gathered. Elara stood at the window, watching them assemble in the clearing below. Hundreds of wolves, human and shifted, arranged in loose rings around a central platform. Varen stood at the edge, arms crossed, his expression smug. Kael was already outside, standing alone near the platform, his posture rigid and controlled. Waiting. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. Mira appeared in the doorway. It's time. Elara nodded. Her hands were shaking. Hey, Mira said, stepping closer. Her voice was softer now. You've got this. Elara looked at her. What if I don't? Mira's mouth curved into a small, fierce smile. Then you fake it until you do. Despite everything, Elara almost laughed. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and followed Mira downstairs.